The Tenet Glaxion is coming to Warframe alongside the Kuva Sobek, so says the in their latest dev stream. And today we're gonna get prepared for the Glax. What are we gonna be looking for? In a Progenitor, modding, Riven, basically everything for this glorious and the only freeze ray in Warframe. Speaking about freezing things, the Glaxion by default has cold damage. Now this is a limited range beam weapon, and when I say limited range, I'm using that lightly because actually it has 28 meters by default plus the 2 meters at the end of the beam. There's a whole sphere thing going on dealing damage to enemies. That's why sometimes it may appear like it's doing area of effect damage. It's not really true area of effect, it's just a 2-meter ball, which coincidentally is just about the range between these two targets. So if I hit this guy like that, this girl actually, and the other girl will be getting hit over. You see, that's why I call them guys. It's weird to say hitting girls, so no, I just won't do it. I won't do it. Now by default, the Glax does have full damage, and that can be a good thing or a bad thing. Now granted, he can change things around with the Tenet version, but let's assume that it's still gonna have cold damage by default. You know, being a freeze, right, and everything. If I add a Progenitor to the mix, you might say, oh, the burr, I'm just gonna go for Toxic, make viral on the weapon. Really? Why would you actually do that? You have so many sources of getting viral, area of effect viral nowadays. For example, a secondary, ew. Or maybe a Sentinel, the brand new, which is not actually new, Diriga, which is technically one of the best primers in the game. You can just get area of effect viral from that. I wouldn't put it on the Glax. What I would do to the Glax is go for corrosive and cold, especially considering that Digital Extremes will be buffing the cold proc. It's gonna be able to freeze targets, well, it still kind of freezes, though it'll have like a visual thing and more critical damage. So what I want from the Glax is a lot of crits and some cold, right? Well, if I factor in that Progenitor, then things get a little bit complicated. And to exemplify what I mean, I need to show you another Nemesis weapon. This is the Tenet Plinks, and on it you will see gas damage. That's a bit of an odd choice. By all intents and purposes, the Progenitor for my Plinks is toxin damage. However, it's gonna be combining with the default heat on the weapon and making gas. We're gonna use this as an example to draw a comparison to the Glaxion, which has default cold damage. You dig? You dig. Fantastic. Now, when it comes to elemental priorities, you should know this by now, but they go from top left to bottom right. But when it comes to weapons' default elemental damage and a Progenitor's elemental damage, things can get a little bit fuzzy. Look what happens if I just add a little bit of, what do I want to add? Electricity, why not? Jolt on the weapon, you'll see now I have radiation and toxin, which means what exactly? Which means that in the priority, the Progenitor's bonus is dead last. Right now, Jolt, the electricity from Jolt, is combining with the weapon's default heat damage and making radiation. But let's say I want to combine the toxin into an elemental combo and leave the default heat damage hanging. Can I do that? Of course you can, but you need to remake the elemental combo that contains toxin within the weapon. In my case, let's say corrosive. I want to make corrosive and heat because, you know, that's a smarter combination. Boom. Pistol Pestilence and Jolt, and right now I got corrosive, the toxin from my Progenitor washing into the corrosive, and the heat from the weapon left hanging. In case you didn't get it by now, it kind of works like this. First you have your elemental mods from top left to bottom right, then right after that you're gonna have the weapon's default damage, and then finally the very last elemental to be taken into consideration when it comes to elemental combos will be your Progenitor bonus. So bear that one in mind when you're thinking about your build for the Tenet Glaxion. I still want to say Tenet Glaxion Vandal, which is weird, not important. So armed with that knowledge, now I know if I want to have corrosive and cold on the weapon, I'm gonna have to have 2 elementals forming corrosive within the actual build of the weapon. Which begs the question, what am I doing with my Progenitor? I can go for toxin and just give it more corrosive damage. Not a bad idea. Another option would be to go for a radiation Progenitor, and then you'll have corrosive, cold, and radiation. Another option for radiation, and the reason why we're talking radiation and corrosive primarily is because we're fighting the Murmur, yes. You can also go for, where the hell is it? Radiated Reload with 60% default radiation and 40% reload. The 40% reload speed isn't really all that helpful in the case of the Vandal because the default reload is 1.8 seconds, 1.3 with Radiated Reload, but you never know. The Tenet variant can have a longer reload, making Radiated Reload a whole lot more valuable. But back to my elemental conundrum. How can I get elemental combos on this one? I really don't want to mod 290s. Another option would be to go for that juicy and delicious Riven, because at the end of the day, hey, Riven disposition 4 out of 5, and Glaxion Rivens have never really been expensive until the said they're coming out with a Tenet. So there you go. You can have one of the two elementals within your Riven. And since we're talking about Rivens and we're supposed to get ready, get multi-shot above everything else, especially this is a beam weapon, remember that. Critical damage, critical chance, this is a discussion that I can't really have because I don't know the base critical chance and critical multiplier on the Tenet. Let's assume that they're not gonna be worse than on the Vandal. Let's say if they give us at least 20-something% as a base CC, that would be fantastic. But my bet, as per usual, will be multi-shot, critical damage depending on the base critical chance of the Tenet variant, and an element that will help you make corrosive, so you can go corrosive cold, a brand new cold proc, which will be... It's brand new cold proc, because they buffed it once, now they're buffing it at the end, which I definitely love. And the cold proc is not the only one getting buffed. Honestly, in more recent times, Digital Extremes are really doing a bang-up job of kind of mixing things around, and I definitely love that. So, back to the weapon. Corrosive cold and radiation take it against the Murmur, in which case it will make for some very easy use for primary frostbite. I will no longer have to use my sentinel to proc frostbite, which means I can put it back to proc vital, so I don't need to mod it on the weapon. And that's mostly it, except for the wildcard. The wildcard is that Digital Extremes announced that in the new Nightwave, we will have a Glaxion Augment, and obviously that one can turn everything on its head. Judging by how Digital Extremes usually goes about releasing Nemesis weapons, as in Kuva or Tenet weapons, they don't really change the functionality of the weapon per se, so I'm assuming they're not gonna do it with the Vandal either. I wanna see a buff in critical chance at the very least, and a bit more flat damage, the base damage of the weapon. And that's it, we're done. Keep in mind, we're also waiting for the Kuva Sobek, so I think I'll do a video on that one as well. As always, my name has been Leyzar. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Like the video and subscribe only if you enjoy the content. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye. The Glaxion Vandal is finally coming to the Tenet Wait, is it the Tenet Glaxion? Yeah, that's it. Hold on.